shift and not very good to be presenting, but I'm really glad that I'm presenting in the afternoon because the talks by Pradeep Bhushan and just now Arvind has kind of laid out a very nice background for what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to be talking very sometimes diametrically opposite to what their views are, but it's always fun to have opposing views as well. So with that, let me just begin my talk. And before that, I just want to thank Professor Trivedi for inviting me. And these are wonderful series of conferences that we must all acknowledge that it is happening here at Indore. And especially when nobody is thinking about AI in design education. But I mean, people are just about talking about AI and education now, right, at a global level. And here, for the second year running now, Professor Trivedi is organizing kind of this very special purpose seminar on thinking and talking about how is AI going to affect design education and how should we respond to that challenge, right? So I'm really, I really hope that there was a larger audience for a seminar like this, because these are very important ideas being talked about, and I'm sure that 10 years from now, when we look back, maybe we won't look back, some LLM will look back, and it will recognize the importance of these series of conferences, right? And it will know and it will tell people why these conferences, these seminars were important. Okay, so I'm confident about that. Pradeep talked about this magic eraser. I'm going to start with that. And this is part of the feature of the photo application in Windows, right? It's kind of this throwaway free application that comes with any Windows installation. And this has been around since Windows 85 almost, but it's like a 30-year-old product or 35-year-old product, right? And recently they introduced AI features in it. It's called this AI eraser or something like that. And what it does is that you can select a portion of a photo if you want to. I mean, of course, there are more sophisticated versions of that, right? I mean, many of your phones will have much better features to do the same stuff and more also, right? Things like this. But I'm talking about this very fundamental aspect of interaction design here, right? Can you recognize what is the concept here of interaction design that is being changed or dramatically different? This is what is called as direct manipulation, right? If you guys have learned HCI as part of your course or will learn, these students, is that there is this is a cornerstone of any UI, right? Basically, the ability to control things so that you have an agency, you have a sense of completion, purpose, and a satisfaction of being in control, right? And the early designers of computer systems, when they enable people to interact with them, I mean, until that point of time, people are using command line interfaces, right? And you have to issue a command, wait for something to happen, and then if your command was wrong, the syntax there was an error, then you have to repeat the command with corrected spelling. And then basically there was this disconnect between what you asked the computer to do and what the computer did, right? So you were kind of remotely operating it, and for the first time using graphical interfaces, people were able to directly manipulate objects, right? And that is how one would do things in real life, right? I mean, I pick up an object, I see what is in my hand, I put it up. There is this continuous feedback about my action, and there is a sense of reversibility about these actions, right? So I can reverse them if I don't want what I did, and then take it back, right? Which is also what these direct manipulation did that, right? So what has been the cornerstone of UIs and the interaction design has fundamentally changed now, right? I mean, you don't directly manipulate anything like this. I mean, you can even imagine this to be a voice interface, right? I say that, I mean, the dog has a leash and remove the leash. And then, system will be able to recognize that command. It will identify what is the part of the picture that is the leash, and then remove it for me, right? Without me even touching the photo in any way, right? So this is what is happening here, okay? Very, very fundamental shift to what we have known all along as this human-computer interaction, right? In which designers have found a major role. I mean, designers have been as part of computer science in this area, right? I mean, HCI, a designer can be a HCI person. Sometimes computer science people are also HCI people, but in order to be a good HCI person, you need to be a designer at heart, right? And by training also. So look at the excitement of Ben Schneiderman, right? Ben Schneiderman is this guy who actually coined the term direct manipulation in 1983, and is talking about this, ability to provide. I mean, people were giving this, but nobody really coined the term direct manipulation yet. He kind of defined that particular activity as this. Okay, this is the concept behind what we are all doing now with mouse and cursor and stuff like that, right? So when he says things like this, so this is 1983, right? And look at the excitement in his voice. Why not make airline reservations by showing the user a map prompting for cursor motion to departing and arriving cities? Then use a calendar to select a date, a clock to indicate the time, and the plane's seating plan with diagonal lines across already reserved seat to select a seat. Okay, and this is Ben Schneiderman imagining a future system in which we will be able to do all these things, right? And it has come to pass right now, and we all do that. But as a designer, he was not only excited about this thing, but he was also foreseeing things that would come, right? So for example, same Ben Schneiderman, about 10 years later, he was worrying about agents, right? So there is direct manipulation versus interface agents, right? And he was thinking mostly in terms of voice agents, right? So I mean, there could be interfaces where actually, all this mouse and UI and things like that we do in order to interact with the computer may not be even necessary, right? There could be some kind of an agent in between that that can do what you want. You kind of understand roughly, you describe in natural language, and then they will be able to do it. And kind of things that Bhushan and Pradeep talked about in the morning, right? So again, I mean, he was worrying about that. So we were able to see this as designers. We have historically played a huge role in HCI, and we have also anticipated these kinds of issues, right? And Don Norman, you must all be very familiar with him. Even before Ben Schneiderman thought about interface agents, he's talking about how people might interact with agents as an interface paradigm. Okay, so there has been this disconnect between AI and HCI for a long time. So there are some historical reasons for it, and it's important for us to understand why this divide has been there. Okay, and that is also kind of explains what is happening with this field. And for us as designers, do we have a role to play at all in them? So Arvind talked about kind of this design intelligence, and very interesting concept, and I completely agree with how he characterizes what design intelligence is and what are the qualities that he thinks are important in this intelligence, right? Now, computer science has traditionally ignored design, okay, and design input, and they have developed AI on their own track. They have kind of hit roadblocks along the way, but they did not budge. There was long AI winters when nothing happened, but they did not worry about it, right? They did not come to designers at all. So but there is HCI people, kind of this in-between people, part CS, part design, doing this very interesting stuff. We had a good time, and we've been having good time so far, but things are about to change. Okay, so I'm going to talk about these historical differences and how that might play a big part in what's going to happen very soon. But with AI now shaping human experiences at scale through generative models, adaptive systems, algorithmic interfaces, does it still need traditional HCI insights? Or will it develop its own models of interaction, right? And I'm going to argue here that it is likely that they will, which is not a good news for us, but let us see what that is, right? So I'm going to talk about these three parts. My talk is in these three parts. Why HCI and AI historically evolved separately, and what that tells us about their current tension. Okay, and how HCI has been marginalized, and it is in danger of being further marginalized, and what alternative futures for AI-driven interaction design might look like. Okay, so let's track these trajectories of AI and HCI, right? There has been a shared interest. The founding fathers of AI and HCI have been the same people actually. People like Simon and Newell have long been concerned with human interaction but have approached it from different angles. They both model people as cognitive machines whose internal mechanisms are similar to digital computers. The clearest expression of this view was articulated in this paper, Physical Symbol Systems Hypothesis, which influenced a generation of researchers both in AI and HCI. The difference is AI aimed to replicate or replace human intelligence, while HCI sought to augment and facilitate human abilities through technology. So that's a key difference, right? One was trying to replace human beings, and the other one was trying to let us now argument, kind of things that Punya was talking about this morning, right? I mean, like a partner in crime, you work together, I tell you what to do, you tell me what is possible, and then we kind of go back and forth and then refine what we want to do. So there is an epistemological and methodological difference. One is the rationalistic, other one is the design approach, right? So the AI people were rationalistic, right? The assumption in the rationalistic approach is that essential aspects of thought can be captured in formal symbolic representations. Whether or not it corresponds directly to formal logic, it operates like logic. In that, well-defined algorithmic rules can be applied to models, processes, and knowledge in the form of symbolic structures. Armed with this logic, we can create intelligent programs and we can design systems that optimize human interaction. Okay? So they hope that they will be able to do this, right? I mean, they can create human intelligence, they can create human thought process. In the design approach, which is where HCI lies, the focus is not on modeling intelligent internal workings, but on the interactions between the person and the enveloping environment. In design, we often work in areas of human interpretations and behavior for which we do not have predictive models. The question is, does it work? Is not approached as a calculation before construction, but in the act of construction, we discover a lot of things, right? Arvind talked about very beautifully about, there is the point that that, it works, or, you have this intuition about, or a gut feeling that you use the word. Aisha talked about that in the morning as well, when there was a question that posed to her saying that, when do you know your work is done, right? And it is done when it is done, I know it, right? Intuitively you have a sense of when it is done, right? No, that's not acceptable to computer science people, right? It doesn't work for us, right? You can't tell us that, at some point of time I'm sure people like Hari will agree with that kind of an argument, right? Hari is a planner, right? He wants clear definitions of things and not this vibing of stuff, right? Okay, so so the early days, if you look at it, AI influenced by symbolic reasoning and formal logic pursued by intelligence as a computational problem, right? HCI emerged from cognitive psychology, focuses on user experience, ergonomics, human factors rather than intelligence per se. Okay, so these were the people associated with them. But there was this huge, period. There was a lull in it because at some point of time, this, coming up with a formal model that would precisely predict human behavior and intelligence was not happening, right? It was a function of the computing capacity, right? So we didn't have computers large enough to process, and companies like IBM, for example, had this special purpose investment vehicles, to kind of promote this whole idea. They came up with this computer, huge computer with, like powerful computing behind it, and create something like, Think Blue or Deep Blue or whatever it is called as, And finally, they had a crowning achievement when they beat the world chess champion and all that. But it required a lot of grunt work, right? Basically, it is like, crunching numbers and, working through millions and millions of games thousands and thousands of games and millions of moves, right? So it's kind of brute force mechanism by which, it's just computation only, right? Nothing like this human intuition or, the kind of brilliance that, a chess player might exhibit, on a moment-to-moment basis. HCI meanwhile embraced situated cognition, arguing intelligence isn't just computation, but arises from embodied, context-dependent interactions, right? So this is the key difference. So machine learning abandoned their methods when they discovered statistical and probabilistic methods, and that's when all this machine learning and all came into play. And they made some huge breakthroughs, right, in things like generative AI, for example, right? So it is not necessary to understand how humans think, but we can figure out patterns in their thinking and replicate it. That's good enough for us, right? So they were making huge stuff, right? And AI, like Punya was saying, and also Arvind mentioned, is that they're producing surprising quality of work that if it was told to you that it was done by a human being, you would acknowledge that work as being great. I've come across a lot of artworks, a lot of writing work, a lot of creative writing like fiction and all that. I mean, if somebody did not tell me that it was written by AI, I wouldn't have. I would have thought that these are like brilliant, right, and amazing works of writing essay or short story or whatever it is. However, AI still operates with a fundamentally different epistemology. Rather than designing explicitly human-centered interfaces, it discovers patterns of interaction from vast data sets, right? This sets up today's key question, okay, does AI now needs HCI principles, or has it developed its own way of understanding human behavior, right? And you know where I am going. So the second part of the talk is about how HCI has been in the margins always, right, and never been considered to be the core computer science, and always suffered from that. Okay, and I work with the computer science people in IIT Bombay. They don't treat HCI seriously at all, right? I mean, if you publish and exclusively HCI related work, considered to be okay type of a researcher, but unless you're doing some algorithms, databases, machine learning, or things like that, you are not considered to be serious scientist in computer science. Yeah. So this whole critical project of HCI, right, and things which is about this human. Arvind talked about empathy and ethics and trust and everything, right? That we all try to imbibe in the systems are considered to be this necessary thing that you need to do in order to do real HCI projects, which is basically do stuff that that increases the revenue and of the companies that people will end up working for. So the shift from CS to AI and its impact on HCI. With AI's rise, the landscape of computing research has shifted dramatically. AI's emphasis on automation, optimization, and predictive modeling has led to dominant narrative that AI systems can infer, predict, and adapt human behavior without requiring explicit HCI insights. HCI researchers now find themselves on the periphery of AI research, as AI labs increasingly claim to study human interaction through data-driven models rather than traditional HCI methods, right? So, in design intelligence, Arvind talked about developing this intelligence, right? And it's about judgment, right? So this judgment, the AI people are saying that we don't need that judgment, right? So we can directly test it on whoever is the ultimate user, and then we will know whether it works or not, right? Ultimately, that is what it is about, right? You need judgment to see whether this product will work on your target customer, but I don't need you. I mean, I'll just text it because I'm operating at scale now, right? So I will have a lot better insight in knowing exactly what works and what doesn't work, right? I don't need a person with the judgment to tell me, however good that judgment is. So we are in this interesting phase. So AI's sudden interest in human-centered research is, ironically, AI researchers now talk about human-centered concepts such as user behavior, ethical consideration, and explainability, areas that have HCI been doing work for a very long time, right? HCI researchers are reinventing concepts like long explored in HCI, often without acknowledging the prior work. Examples: usability, interpretability, interaction design principles are now being rebranded as AI-driven user experience, AI UX, or explainable AI, XAI, and so on, right? These are things that traditionally design and HCI have been, involved with, and these were the province of the designers always. So HCI has been in the service role for a long, and this is going to become, even more pronounced now. Okay. So if you look at what is happening with, in ML models and the explainable UI, explainable AI part, that now designers are brought in to kind of explain the how this thing works, because it's a black box, and then or maybe some kind of an audit is required, and some kind of ethics rules to be followed, some kind of a regulation that is to be brought out. So here is these kinds of marginal roles that designers are brought in to bring in those things that are missing in AI still, but still needs to operate business. So with this background, I want to kind of imagine 4 possible scenarios, going from kind of this not so bad to kind of very extreme. What is the first scenario is AI augmented HCI, human-centered design at scale. Okay, so this seems like a good thing. HCI evolves, integrating AI into its traditional frameworks. So when I say HCI, by the way, I'm talking about UI UX thing that is typically practiced as it is practiced in the industry. So what happens in this scenario is that AI does not replace HCI but supercharges it. Okay, AI assists designers by automating user research, A/B testing, and interface adaptations. Human-centered design that persists but operates at a scale impossible with standard design methods. Right? Now, if you want to do some user research or even usability evaluation, you can do it with some 50 people, 100 people. More money, more time you have, maybe you can do it with some 200, 300 people, and that's where it ends, right? And then you can kind of draw your insights and conclusions based on that. Now you cannot do it. I'm sure that Google is running an A/B test every time something is rolled out, and we don't even notice it, right? So we are unwitting participants of these tests that are happening around all the time. Every time you use Gmail, you are participating in some kind of a test probably, right? And therefore it goes into validating the design, improving the design, and the loop, feedback loop for the designers working there is so much faster, right, and so much more reliable, the data that they get. So this is at scale, right, and therefore this is good, right? AI-driven usability testing, when neural networks predict friction points in interfaces before human testing. Like, I mean, you can train models that can detect friction points. For example, typically what is found, because a lot of things are kind of common sense, you will know, as an experienced designer, you will know what are the problems areas or the pain points as it is called, right? AI-enhanced co-design tools. We have already, GPT-powered Figma assistants, for example, that iterate on UX flows dynamically. Ethical UI AI auditing, ensuring that interaction paradigms don't just optimize for engagement, but also for fairness, for not being biased, etc., and all that. The tension is that does this enhance human agency in design or make HCI a mere curation layer over AI-driven interaction models? Okay. Now the second scenario is algorithmic interaction. AI as its own UX designer. Okay. AI replaces the need for traditional usability and interaction design by dynamically shaping experiences at the individual level. Okay. So it is individual, right? It's something similar to what Bhushan was talking about, right? It's basically UI less, right? So basically it is catering to an audience of one. Okay, this is one user that it knows very well, and then it can cater an interface to that person. AI doesn't need predefined interaction models. It learns optimal interaction strategies directly from the user data. Okay, it's like your friend now, right? Friend versus design principles, right, or something like that. You have interfaces no longer designed but emerge from AI-driven optimization. Traditional UX concepts like navigation button menus fade as the AI anticipates intent, right? You kind of you know what the intent is, and therefore you know a lot of things about it. And agents are getting there, right? The Manus that Pradeep referred to in the morning is kind of this general purpose worker, right? I mean, it is like a person behind a computer, right? It does everything that a normal person using a computer, using many tools, many websites can do, use to accomplish a particular task. So that kind of capability we are seeing now, and therefore you will not have what used to be called as an UI and all that. So when you don't have an UI, you don't have an app, to work on. What is the role of a designer then? Adaptive interfaces, systems that morph based on individual interaction history. An AI-driven OS that changes habits, right? I mean, they're talking about this OS level difference that individually can be different for different people. So you're not like having a Android, standard Android on all phones and a standard set of applications that you're using. You are using your own OS. It's kind of catered to you, and it knows you very well. Invisible UI, interaction moves away from screens into gestures, voice, predictive automation. AI as a dynamic intermediary. LLMs mediate interaction with systems. So instead of clicking through settings, you simply state what you want and the AI interprets and acts accordingly. Tension is AI optimizes engagement and efficiency without human oversight. What happens to usability, trust, and ethical concerns? Right? Third one is post-HCI, interaction as a multi-agent system. HCI ceases to be about users and interfaces. Instead, we interact within AI-mediated ecosystem of agents. Right? This is precisely the scenario that Bhushan was talking about. Right? I mean, there's nothing like it. I mean, you don't have to have Swiggy in your phone, right? And this agent kind of figures out that Swiggy is selling the same thing for 20 rupees less, 20% less, and then it will order it on your behalf and send it to you because it knows everything about you, where you live and what is your bank number, UPI code, or whatever it is, right? AI systems don't just mediate interaction, they become interaction participants. Instead of designing for users, designers create multi-agent systems where AI humans co-evolve interaction styles dramatically. Interfaces dissolve into conversational, social, and network AI entities. So they are like friends, So basically they are friends, You need something, you pick up a phone and talk to your friend, or you just mention it in a conversation, Or the friend even infers, okay, you're looking dull, what's happening today? Are you okay, And then they kind of, help you out, right? I mean, that is even better, isn't it? AI as a social actor, instead of static UI elements, users engage in multi-agent conversations where different AI models negotiate, advise, and interact. Example, a committee of AI assistants, for example. You're not dealing with one assistant, but multiple assistants, right? You're kind of deploying an army of assistants which will kind of figure out what is good for you. Each specializing in different domains. Personalized interaction dialects. I mean, you don't need to even kind of do the kind of prompts that we are doing now anymore, right? You can kind of come up with a shorthand for what you want to say, right? I mean, when you kind of live with somebody for a very long time, I mean, a simple nod or a gesture or a facial expression can communicate a lot of things, right? I mean, people who have been married here for a long time will know what I'm talking about, right? You have this very non-verbal, and just with just a look and eyesight, I can communicate a lot of things to my wife, for example, right? I mean, that is the level of kind of very abbreviated conversation I'm talking about, extreme efficiency. So that's personal interaction dialects. Like you see a lot of dialects, coming up. And self-modifying interfaces, UI isn't pre-designed; it evolves in response to both AI and human agency. So this can also be applied to workplaces, right? And there are these group dynamics that happen, right? I mean, you work with some people very well, some people doesn't, and it can figure out, not only it can figure out one person, but also a group. And the last, does this empower users or erode autonomy as AI interaction norms become self-reinforcing? The last one is AI first design, the end of human-centered thinking. AI stops being a tool for humans and instead humans become participants in an AI optimized environment. Okay, so we all begin to live in this very scary environment which is optimized for AI, not for humans. Okay, now design endeavor is all about optimizing for humans. In my website is designed so that it has good information architecture. You want to go click through, the links are visible, buttons, you know what it is, and all these kind of things, right? So the websites will not be about human beings because it will be for LLM, right? LLMs don't need so many web pages, right? They just need one file with all the content and the metadata in it, and then they will understand it, right? So imagine the kind of efficiency that will come into. Now, the world is not optimized for LLMs at all. So it's a very hard work that LLMs are doing right now, right? Because it is reading PDF, it is reading photo, it is reading videos, and it is kind of collecting this very, very difficult and disparate data and then trying to make sense of it. And think about it, it's so good now, right? Imagine if it is optimized for it, it will become so much more powerful. And therefore, there is incentive to make it compatible for the LLMs rather than for the human being. Because at some point of time, we will have enough faith in LLMs and AI that we will kind of delegate most of the work and decision making and judgment to them, that we will be okay with it, right? And therefore, instead of index.html, you will have llm.txt. That is your website basically, right? So everything is there and then it is machine readable, right? Rather than human readable. Instead of sorry. So instead of centering human needs, AI optimizes for system-wide objectives, right? Efficiency, sustainability, knowledge production, right? Now this is also good in the sense that see something like sustainability goals or achieving doing something about global warming, for example, it has never been possible, right? Because there is just too many interested parties, too many competing interests, and so on and so forth, right? So a country like China, for example, can at that global level think about optimizing the country so that interactions and people's behavior all towards furthering this goal, right? So some of these intractable problems like global warming, poverty, for example, maybe it's solvable because of this kind of an approach. That's kind of the silver lining to this whole thing. AI first workplaces, Google search effects at scale. Just as most people don't navigate the web manually anymore, future interaction models might make explicit choices obsolete, relying entirely on AI-generated interests. So the tension here is, does AI first design make interaction frictionless, or does it remove meaningful human choice, right? So these are all kind of questions that we need to think about. So that ends my presentation. I'll be happy to take any questions if you have. Thank you.
There is science fiction that are there. So that's a good place to look for.
Yeah. I'm not read anything recently, but apparently there is one recent movie that has come up now, which is very similar. I kind of heard about that movie.
Should go back to Black Mirror again.
They have dealt with all these themes very well. Yeah.
Which one of these do you feel is most likely to use?
The first one is already here, right? And I told you about this, UI, usability testing, and all this happening at scale is happening. And we are almost at the third level, right? The agents that are there. The last one is maybe a distant possibility, but we definitely first three are all. Yeah.